We want to encourage you to embrace midlife, for it not to be something that you push away. Your midlife is not going to be like your mom's midlife, which is what we all fear, right?
I think if I could give it a subtitle, it would be Not Your Mama's Midlife. Welcome to Season 1, Episode 1. We're so glad you've joined us. My name is Amelia Rhodes. I'll be your host today. And joining us is my co-host, Brenda Yoder.
Hi, everyone.
We're so glad you've joined us for this journey. And today we're going to just do some introductions, talk a little bit about why we're doing this podcast and where we're headed and kind of what you can expect going forward. Does that sound good, Brenda?
That sounds great.
So I thought it'd be fun to kind of get the official stuff out of the way first and maybe do our official bios, and then we can get to the fun stuff of our stage of life and where we're at and why we wanted to do this podcast. Sound all right to you, Brenda?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Let's let them know who we are, like, you know, the pretty version, and then we can do the real version.
The pretty version and then the, real life version.
Yeah.
All right. I've got your official bio, so I've got to adjust my bifocals here. So make sure I can read it. So Brenda Yoder is a speaker, author, licensed mental health counselor, and school counselor whose passion is encouraging others when life doesn't fit the storybook image. Her books, Fledge, Launching Your Kids Without Losing Your Mind, is a personal handbook for midlife moms in the season of raising and releasing kids. And Balance, Busyness, and Not Doing It All is for moms in the busiest season of parenting, littles on up. Brenda's been featured in Guidepost and Chicken Soup for the Soul books, The Washington Post, and is a writer at For the Family. Brenda is a former middle school and high school teacher and was twice awarded the Touchstone Award for Teachers. Her ministry and podcast, Life Beyond the Picket Fence, is found at brendayoder.com, where she writes about faith, life, and family beyond the storybook image. Brenda is a wife and mom of 4 children, ranging from college students to adults, grandma to one, and lives on a farm in Indiana. You can connect with her on Instagram at Brenda Yoder Speaks and on Facebook at Brenda Yoder Speaker. Brenda?
No wonder I'm tired. I think we're both tired. We've been doing a lot of other things while we've been moms also. So I'm excited to introduce you to our co-host, Amelia Rhodes. Amelia is the author of Pray A to Z, a practical guide to praying for your community. And isn't it time for a coffee break? Doing life together in an all about me kind of world. Amelia's writing has been featured in Chicken Soup for the Soul, in the international devotional, The Upper Room, and in the Guidepost devotionals, Every Day with Jesus and All God's Creatures. Amelia speaks to women's groups on topics of spiritual growth, friendship, and community, offering practical tools for living our faith in the everyday. Amelia lives in Michigan with her husband, 2 teenagers, and a dog. She's on staff at a large church where she also serves as a writer for the resources. She loves to hang out with friends over coffee or on a local trail. And you can connect with her online at ameliarhodes.com. And Amelia, what are your social media handles?
Instagram is Amelia M. Rhodes and Facebook is Amelia Rhodes Writer. And we will put all of these links and our social media links in the show notes. So be sure to check those out when you're done with the episode. But what a joy, Brenda. This is so fun. We've been friends for a good 8-9 years now, I think.
Yeah, we have been.
Before any of those bios were filled out. We met each other really at the beginning of our ministry and writing careers. And it's been so fun to watch you raise your kids and enter this season of ministry. And I'm just a few steps behind of you. So I feel like I've always looked up to you for a picture of what's coming next.
Yeah. And that's kind of what, as I've thought about this podcast, really is kind of fun, is when we first met, I was actually probably about your age and entering into my 40s and raising teenagers and kids. We've got a couple more kids than you do. So our span's a little bit longer, but you were in your 30s. And I think your youngest was actually just going to kindergarten, because I think it was the very first year that you didn't have kids at home all day. And so it's been fun as we have chatted back and forth just about life through these years, because we really have almost a fluid stair step all the way down. In fact, my youngest is really just a couple of years older than your oldest.
Right. Because your youngest is just second year of college, and my oldest is sophomore in high school. So
yeah.
you're right. I think they were 4 and 6 maybe when we met, and now it's a decade later, they're 14 and 16. And I remember at that phase thinking, oh, where Brenda is so far away. And I admit the elementary years felt like they dragged on for 100 years. And now I got an email this week that I did not want to open, because opening it meant I had to accept it. And it was an invitation for my son for high school orientation. And there was something about opening that email where I realized we're in the home stretch. We're almost there. Like, this is it. 4 years, one hand. I can count on one hand. So it felt like those early years dragged on, and the last ones have just flown by. And so here I am, right where you were when we met.
Yeah. And I think, you had written the introduction for Fledge, which is about raising your kids. It really is about everything related to this stage. And as I was writing that, I often felt so weepy. Well, just in life, you're weepy. And it's all of those first time things and last time things, and all of the changes that go on. And, you know, it's just great to have, I think, this dual perspective of we're both in the stage. And I think that's the thing about midlife that is so alarming, or so disarming, maybe not alarming but disarming, is that it's not a stage that like has this wide open door that says, okay, now you're entering, the baby stage, or now you're entering the parenting teen stage. And you're definitely not exclusively entering the empty nest stage. And that's one reason why I wrote Fledge, is because there's this huge stage in between of when you're still parenting, and yet you're getting ready to release your kids, but you're also in the middle of your life. Your body is changing, your friendships are changing, your parents are aging. There's so much going on, and there's nothing there to prepare you for it.
I would agree. I keep thinking back as I'm hitting all of these firsts, how prepared I was for all of the firsts when they were babies and toddlers, all the books that were out there, the moms that we would talk to. Oh, which bottle do you buy? I remember going and registering for my baby registry with a friend who had a baby, a year before I did. And we just talked about all the things. Is this right? Is this not right? Is this normal? And then you hit this certain stage and we just don't talk about it so much anymore. I don't know if it's because it's too hard and there aren't as many books out there. And I'm like, all of these firsts that I don't feel prepared for, the firsts and the lasts, like that email. I didn't expect that moment to hit me so hard for my youngest going into high school. I'm not typically a very emotional person, but here I am weepy over an email subject line. So that was one reason we wanted to share this podcast, was because we've walked through this, are walking through this together, and that relationship has been so valuable. And we just want all of the moms out there who find this podcast to know they're not alone. These things are normal. These things are challenging, but most definitely you're not alone. And if you don't have a space to really voice these questions of, is this normal? Am I the only one? We hope this will be a space where you feel warmly welcomed and invited to know you're not alone. You're dearly loved. Your children are dearly loved. And no matter what choices they're making or not making, we're all in this together as a community.
And that is so important. I think when we first met, I kind of shared a little bit of my story with you, which was feeling alone as I was raising my oldest ones. We do the best with what we know. And unfortunately, for a lot of our firstborn children, they get the brunt of what we didn't know. And I just remember raising my older teenagers feeling like I was all alone, and that there weren't a lot of resources. And during that time, there weren't a lot of resources. Podcasts and blogs and things like that were not as available as what they are now. And most of the books were really just about raising teenagers. And if you didn't follow the formula, or if you did follow the formula, which was kind of our experience, you followed the formula, but it wasn't turning out exactly the way you thought it would. And I really needed someone just a step ahead of me, a season ahead of me, who had gone through not an easy time raising their teenagers, who was able to kind of turn back at me and say, hey, like, it's going to be okay. You're going to make it through. It is rough, but I'm here with you. And so that's what I'm excited to do with you, and to do to all women in the stage of midlife, because the one thing I've learned about midlife is, man, there just are no markers, like even in physical things. I have friends who went through um, what my great grandma would call the change, went through menopause really early in her 40s. And then I have friends, even in their mid to late 50s, who still haven't experienced that. So there are just so many changes. And I think, Amelia, we can feel really vulnerable. Have you experienced that? You even just mentioned the tears when you're not necessarily an emotional person. Uh,
Absolutely. And it's kind of taken me by surprise. I'm mid 40s and have always felt like I could keep it together. And just the weepiness that has come, not in a bad way, but I think even in this past year, we've all felt so much pressure. Life as we know it has been dismantled and really not put back together yet. And raising teenagers and young adults in the middle of a pandemic, there's no manual for that. And what I just keep telling myself and my friends and our kids is, I don't know, we've never done this before. And it's okay that we don't know. And we're figuring it out as we go. And so I just feel like midlife teenagers in the middle of all of this, in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of all of these unexpected things happening to yourself, it's happening to your kids now. Everything as we knew it is different. And so just for those going through midlife now, I just feel extra vulnerable, extra unknown, like I should have it together. I should have more figured out. And then realizing really the whole world is in that boat. And for those of us really in the middle of still our careers, our spouses' careers, of helping our parents in the middle of a pandemic, and then our teenagers who everything that they know, their sports, their concerts, all these things we took for granted aren't there anymore. So you're concerned about their mental health and your parents' health and your own health. And it's just felt this very squeezed in the middle season. And so, yes, I've felt that vulnerability and lack of knowing any idea what's going to happen when I wake up each day.
Right. And I think as a parent of young adults, of college age students then, and young adults, we've gone through this pandemic with a college graduation that didn't happen, and potential jobs that my son was actually applying for. He was in an industry where the entire industry shut down. And so he had a job offer waiting there for him, but was not able to extend that. And then we had two in college last year, as they both came home. And so as those kind of in my peer group then of the teenagers moving home, or the not the teenagers but the young adults moving home, and the messiness of teens living at home, of young adults living at home when they naturally would not be living at home, and because they'd be at college, but they're doing college while they're at home. And that has been really stressful for a lot of families on both ends. And then the other piece too is just really keeping a tabs on everyone's mental health, because mental health of teens and then mental health of young adults. And I know we'll talk about this throughout our time, and I mentioned this in Fledge quite a bit, but once kids are young adults, they're not under your kind of your, I don't want to say authority, but at the end of the day, when you're still parenting teens, parents still have more of a role of the buck stops here because I'm responsible for you. And as they get older and post graduation, you don't have as much of that tangible presence or say in their life. And so that's become even very disarming as a parent of young adults, of not knowing, kind of checking to make sure they're doing okay, being in their life, but not in their life. And yet the pandemic has brought so many changes for them that have have you've just really had to watch out for and support them in.
The messy middle. I think that's what you had said. I love that phrase. And I think for this midlife, that's something that we can just all agree. It's messy. There's no straight path forward. It's going to be unique to your family, unique to you, your body, your phase of life, your personality. And we all are kind of untangling it together. And I think that's just the key, that we're in it together. We'll support each other. And you're a mess. I'm a mess. Some days we're okay. Some days we're not. And it's okay.
I do want to just mention that that term messy middle is one that I heard from Jill Savage, and she's a fellow author, and she's the author of Empty Nest Full Life book. But that's a term that she uses kind of for the messy middle, which is who we're talking to. Everyone kind of in the messy middle of life, but also in the messy middle of parenting, when you've got some listening, maybe midlife, and have a toddler.
Right.
And some may, I have several friends who became empty nesters in their early 40s. So, but all of the transitions, I I often use the term, this time reminds me of when you're in junior high, like at a dance. Junior high feels so awkward. I don't think there's any other time in life that feels awkward and vulnerable. And yet, I think midlife is the same way. We don't know what's going on, and our emotions are heightened, and we're just, there's a lot of fear a little bit there too. But then also a lot of humor. So that's the
Yes.
other thing too, Amelia. Share your passion for the podcast for humor.
I would love to have a segment every week that's called Laughter Matters, because I have found laughter to be so important in this phase of life. There was a season not too long ago, just a few years ago, where everything was hard and heavy and not going well. And I realized I'm not laughing anymore. There was no humor, no lightheartedness. I was waking up every day with a panic attack, with a racing heart, and just didn't know how to get out of it. And laughter formed the way forward, finding humor in the midst of all of the hard. It's a gift, really. Laughter is a gift. And so I would love to have a segment every week where we talk about Laughter Matters, and we have our listeners share the things that are making them laugh or chuckle. And I have found I've had to go seek it. I've had to go find humor. I read an article recently that said, keep humor on the horizon. And so there are certain people I might follow on social media. There are conversations with my kids that I try to make note of because it's funny and we need to laugh. Otherwise, we're going to end up crying. So I think finding some lightheartedness in the midst of the mess, in the midst of the challenge, is healthy.
It is. And what we've talked about is the difference of the stage of life, because when the kids are young, you can post their funny things on social media, right? And it's funny and you're sharing your kids' life. But once your kids get older, especially upper elementary, and the teen years, and then of course young adult and adult life, you're sharing really about their life without their permission. And so we don't share as much on social media, even some of those funny things. Just just last night, as I was looking at some different photos, so my husband and I had our anniversary of our first date when we were just 18 and 15 yesterday. And I was looking at photos to like post just one photo of us as a couple on social media. And I came across a photo of a church photo of our family when right after our fourth was born. And he was like 3 weeks old. Our other one would have been 2. And then we would have had like a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old. And it was the worst family photo ever. And I literally just sat in my chair and laughed. I texted them. I think I even texted it to you because you're one of the only friends I could probably text that to.
Right.
But, I kind of said, yeah, I probably don't dare post this on social media, but I did. Just sat there and laughed at it. And that was so refreshing. But it's so sad that we're just sitting at home in a corner, just laughing by ourselves.
Laughing at where you used to be. I've give credit to a friend, Erica. What's making me laugh today is a meme that she sent me yesterday on Instagram. And it says, middle age happiness is pulling out a load of laundry to fold it and realizing there's only 8 towels to fold instead of 46 pieces of small human clothing. And so just those little things, those chuckles that make us laugh. I'm like, yes, laundry is so much easier. And every time I do pull out a load of towels, I'm like so happy because I know I'll be done in like 2 minutes.
Right. Yeah.
So Brenda, tell us a little bit about the phase of life that you're in right now. We've covered it a little bit, but kind of give us the details of kids and where they are and what life looks like for you right now.
Sure. So we have 4 kids and they're all evenly spaced. So they're all 3 years apart, which meant when they were all home, we always had someone in a different stage, which was very taxing. For many years, we had a a high schooler, a middle schooler, upper elementary, lower elementary. And then we had a college age, and then high school, middle school, upper elementary. And then we had one out of college, one in college, high school, junior high. And now we have one in college, one recently graduated from college. And then we have two, what I say, fully fledged adults. One is married and has our very first grandchild. And so he's 6 months and adorable. And I love visiting them. And then we have our oldest one is she just came home from the mission field. So we have been in transition as a family. And I think that's the piece about midlife again, which feels vulnerable. When your kids are younger, life is more predictable and you have your hands on kids more. But as your kids get older and as they start really on their own path of life, there is no manual for how to interact with them. Everything that is going on in their life, you experience a little bit differently. And so it's definitely a process, but I would have to say that not having kids at home every day, I was in a season where I cried. In fact, when I wrote Fledge, it was because our third one was going to college and we only had one at home, and I was already grieving that loss, and he still had 3 years at home yet.
I remember that.
Yeah, I cried a lot that summer. I cried a lot while I wrote Fledge. I cried a lot as it came out, and we're a couple years past that now. And I would have to say I do really enjoy only doing 3 loads of laundry. Oh, when we have to do laundry. I love our kids coming home. I love the spaces that I finally have for myself, because when you are in the throes of everything, you really don't have time for yourself. And that's something I have fought very hard for my own mental health and for just balance while you're raising kids and having a career and they're coming and they're going.
It's
What about
challenging. It's challenging, but so important.
it is so important. So you have had a very different year this year because you have kids at significant stages right there as teens. But as you just said, they've been doing school at home most of the year, haven't they?
They have. So I have 2 teenagers. My husband and I got married young. So this summer we will celebrate 24 years of marriage, which is weird because I remember celebrating our parents' 25th anniversaries right after we got married. So we have a daughter who's 16, a new driver's license. So that's a whole new phase of letting go and releasing. I remember the first time she pulled away from the house, I texted a couple friends. She's driving herself to sports practice. Like, I am not okay. And just having those people who are like, it's okay. I remember that. It takes a few times and then you'll get comfortable. It'll be all right. So she is in high school sports. So I'm in the season of getting up at 5 a.m. on Saturday to make breakfast for a couple teammates to eat breakfast at 5:30 because they have to be on the bus at 6:30. And because of the pandemic, they can't have food at the competition. So everything that would be normal for high school is a little bit different and a little more complicated. So she's a high school cheerleader. So we're in the season of competitive sports. And we're just so thankful to be able to have it. So while it's busy and while there's not a lot of time for ourselves, I know it's a short season. And I think because of the past year, we're not taking any of it for granted. Being able to get up at 5 a.m., make breakfast, get on a bus at 6 a.m. is such a gift that I think we would have taken for granted a year ago. But to be able to sit in the stands and have a season, even though it's short, is such a gift. So we're in the season of high school, a new driver, high school sports, all that comes with that. And then our son is 14 and wrapping up 8th grade. So we're sprinting to the finish line of middle school, which I'm excited about, yet also a little bit sad because I know how fast the years fly by. And so they have not been in school 5 days a week since, well, it's been a year.
Mm-hmm.
It has been a year. So we just got an email that we are celebrating that they will go back to school 5 days a week in a couple weeks. And so it will have been a year. So it's this season of start, stop. And the lack of consistency and the lack of routine is something that we have struggled with, that I have struggled with. Even, I work at a church. And so we were closed for a while. And there's this start, stop. You're in the office, not in the office. There's not been a predictable routine. And I have felt the weight of that. We have all felt the weight of that. Yet at the same time, it's been a gift to have extended time together, to get to know our teenagers, to do things we wouldn't have done otherwise. And we're thankful for the gifts that we've seen in the midst of it, even though it's been so challenging.
I would agree with you on that. Last year was our first year as empty nest during the school year. So we had 2 in college last year, and the pandemic sent a year ago this time sent my 2 college sons home. It sent my husband home because he teaches. It sent me home doing therapy from my home when I had a college kid sleeping on the other side, or him doing his virtual classes while I'm trying to do therapy on the other side. And it was really difficult. And I actually went back to work in a school part-time as a school counselor, which is what I've done in the past. And that has been a good new routine for me. It's been something that has been consistent. We have been able to be in person. But I just made the comment to you the other day because my days have been long at school because my coworker has been out due to a maternity leave. And I've been staying at school until I get done. And then I've had other things in the evening. And I texted you and I said, how did I used to do this every day with 4 kids with sports every night? Because I taught high school when my older ones were in junior high and high school. And you texted back and said, you were younger. And, I think that's part of the whole dynamic of this midlife thing is you really do go, like, you live your fullest, I believe, in those final years right before your kids leave home, even whether it's your first one or your last one, because that's really where you are building your career. You're kind of building your career, or if you're a stay-at-home mom during that time, you're still fully involved in your children's lives. And I used to have a saying when all of our kids were home, if my husband and I ever divorced, it's because of the calendar. We even limited our kids to two sports each, but there were weeks where we had multiple activities on one night and had something every night and on the weekends. And now that we're at a different space, in fact, this fall was really the first time my husband and I are trying to learn how to just kind of be together and watch TV, because that's new for us. But you just go and you go and you go. And I responded back to you as I thought about it. I think a lot of the energy comes from actually having your kids at home,
Oh,
because
absolutely.
you play off each other, but you're also pouring yourself into them, which intrinsically just gives you purpose. There's that cycle that goes back and forth.
And they have an energy that they bring to the home. They have a joy and a lightness and just a buzz about them as they're building their life and figuring out who they are. That also brings energy to you, even though you're tired. And as I was texting you back, that's what was happening. I had a dog on my lap and one kid doing homework and another one practicing cello. And the house was very alive in the midst of all of that. So, yes, you had made a comment in Fledge, your opening, that where you had said this stage of life is the best of times and the worst of times. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? And then we'll bring this episode home as we talk about all of this that we're all going through.
Yeah. And I'll probably cry. I guess our podcast people will just have to get used to that. I do wear my emotions a little bit more, but maybe it's just midlife. It's the best of time because it truly is the fullness of, I think, everything that you pour your heart into as a mom. We pour, I think my husband and I have talked about this before, and I think he finally understands it. When you carry a child, and I know a lot of moms listening may not have carried their own children, but there's something that God has designed for mothers, that you were always thinking about your children all the time. Like, it's kind of like there's always something in the background where you're tied to your children, kind of like with this invisible string, even though they never know about it. And it's not like you think about them all the time, but you always are kind of taking care of them, whether you're not physically taking care of them or not. You're always kind of tied to them. And so the best of times is that all of that is right in front of you, and you're celebrating their life and the full house. And you have the tangible purpose right in front of you. And it's also the worst of times because there's a lot of hardness there too. And I say in Fledge that I think between the time your first one enters middle school until your last one enters college, every family goes through something very hard. And that has been something I've experienced over and over again. Teens you can love them 1 minute and you can just be ready to shove them out the door the same way with young adults. There's a lot of drama. There's a lot of angst because they're going through things and that's hard on you. And as a parent, as you're releasing, you do give up control. You do take your hands off. So as a parent, you have more emotions back and forth than when you do when they're little, because when they're little, you really can fix a lot of the problems and you really tangibly take care of a lot of things. But then you are experiencing all of these different changes too. And I think Amelia, you said that even with the pandemic, like we don't know what's happening, right? Going through the pandemic. Well, when you're going through midlife, you don't know what's happening. Your body is changing. Your relationships are changing with your kids, with your friends, with your husband. Everything that you thought you knew about life is like no longer.
Right.
And so when I wrote Fledge, I really tried to hit every category of all of those changes, of family life changes, your body changes, your relationships change, your parenting, your own parents, not parenting, but you're helping care for them. We have lost 2 parents in midlife. One is just recent, is just a couple of months ago for myself. My father died of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And as a mom, there's no one there taking care of you.
Right.
And I think that's the thing. When I wrote Fledge, I really wanted it to minister to moms because mom is squeezed. She's squeezed in all these different ways. And no one's kind of there saying, hey, how are you doing? Like when your daughter drives off on her first day, right?
Right.
It's about her, but you're standing back there saying, hey, wait a minute, this is a huge milestone for me.
This process of letting go is so big and longer than I expected. I thought, oh, they graduate from high school, then you let go. No, I'm realizing as they enter high school, as they start to drive, it's a long process. And you cover that so well in Fledge. And so we will definitely link to Brenda's book, Fledge, Launching Your Kids Without Losing Your Mind, in the show notes. It really is a handbook. And it helped me out so much over the past few years as I've been entering this phase. And we just want you to know that you're not alone. And we're here to cheer you on as you walk through this phase of life. So one of the things we also want to include in the podcast is kind of this closing action step. So you hear something, we'll talk about a topic, and then we'd love for you to know that action matters, to put something into practice for what we've talked about this week. And so we didn't really discuss this ahead of time. So Brenda, what should our action step be for this week? As we're realizing this is the phase of life we're in, it's messy, we don't know what we're doing. What should be our step forward in the next couple of days?
I think you just said it. I think admitting that this is where you are, because as we have talked about this podcast, and I'll be the first one to say I was right there. And when I was in my early 40s, I did not want to admit that I was midlife. And even at my age, which I am in the other decade, is the same realization of this is where I am. Because when we can kind of identify, okay, I am 40 something, I am 50 something, even, I think the older you get, the more the ages look younger. So I'm like, oh, 90 really is old. Between there, that's not really that old. 60 now, 70 doesn't look so old because, I'm a decade away from that. So, but I think just admitting where you are and in just doing that, the word grief is something we'll talk about, but that's really so much a part of this stage, is grieving maybe some of the things that you wished you would have done, or you find yourself at this place in midlife and there is a lot of reflecting. So part of that reflecting, we would just invite you to admit that this is where you are and embrace it. We want to encourage you to embrace midlife, for it not to be something that you push away. Your midlife is not going to be like your mom's midlife, which is what we all fear, right?
I think if I could give it a subtitle, it would be Not Your Mama's Midlife.
Yeah. Well, there we go. So
I think there is such power in naming it. And I've heard you say that as a counselor. And so just naming it, this is where I am, accepting it, embracing it, laughing about it, having fun with it. It's not something to be afraid of, but it's something to fully embrace and make the most of and enjoy. And sometimes making the most of it is just getting up and getting through the day, and that's okay.
right.
Well,
And to give yourself grace to be able to say, oh, like when you said, yeah, but when I was like, how did I do this? And you're like, well, you're a little bit older. I wanted to resist that too, saying, no, I still have the same energy as I did. No, there are days where you do not have the energy you used to.
There are just little things that we just come to accept. And I think the sooner we accept them, embrace them, and thank God for them. And I had a friend recently reach out. She was turning 40. And so in the 40 days leading up to 40, she asked a friend each day for advice or things that that friend wished she had known as she turned 40. And my response to her was, aging is a gift. See it as a gift. Even some of the aches and the wrinkles and the gray hairs, I've just come to this place where I own it and I admit it. Aging is a gift, and that not everyone gets to receive that gift. And that's the thing that's hit me deeply over the past couple of years, is every day to wake up and say, this is a gift. I'm 44. That's a gift. Okay, my knee hurts a little bit today. I can feel my knee. I have a knee. It's a gift. And so that was just my encouragement to her as she was turning 40. And that would be my encouragement to you, to see midlife as a gift.
That's a great way to end our first show.
Thank you all for joining us. We're so glad you were here today. Be sure to check out the show notes for links. We'll link to the books that we mentioned. And we hope to see you next week. We are going to talk about laughter. And the whole episode will be about finding joy and laughter in the midst of midlife. We hope to see you next time.
Bye.